everyone, it's me, Samantha, and this is Power Podcast. Hello, everyone. This is Sam, and you are listening to Power Up Podcast. It is so good to be back. I am so excited that now we are on video. So that has a whole new dynamic that we're introducing. After a brief hiatus, we are back with our first episode with none other than our inaugural Citizen Service President, Dr. John Silvanus Wilson. So without further ado, hello, welcome. So good to see you again. Let's get straight into it. Okay, hello everyone. I am Sam, and this is the Power Up Podcast. We are on video for the first time, one of the first times, so I'm really excited to start that new tradition with none other than our inaugural president of Citizen Service, Dr. John Silvanus Wilson. Dr. Wilson is a graduate of Morehouse College, father of three, and he earned his doctoral degree at Harvard University. He served under President Barack Obama as the head of the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities. Dr. Wilson was appointed the 11th president of Morehouse College in 2012, a real full circle moment, and he served as a director at MIT. Dr. Wilson, how are you today?
I'm well. How are you, Sam?
I'm damp. It's raining a lot today, so
Okay.
I'm a little damp, but I'm really good. I'm really
Cool.
excited to be here with you today.
Yeah.
So, as usual tradition on Power Podcast, I ask every interviewee the same question, and I have to ask you, what does power up mean to you? And please know there are no wrong answers. This is a fully personal understanding.
Yeah. No, I've been hearing that term a lot since I've been involved in the citizen service, and so it has meaning there, but also has meaning to me personally. Power up means exercising agency. It really means stepping out of your comfort zone, stepping out of your anonymity, and really doing some things about our condition. And so the citizen service, one of the reasons it really compelled me is it is fundamentally about empowering people. And power up is associated with that. And it really is, I hear it as empower up. So we're empowering people. We're giving them ideas for how they can be not just relevant, but consequential, how they can take action. And that's what power up means to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love how you mentioned stepping out of anonymity, because I think there's this, we have a few episodes about imposter syndrome and things of that nature. And one of the things that a lot of young people or people in general are compelled to believe is that they're just another face in the crowd, someone that's anonymous, someone that can't really be distinguished from others. And so I love this idea that, that anonymity to a certain extent is something that you choose to be in and something that you can equally choose to come out of. And I've never heard it expressed that way, but it is very empowering, and it kind of harkens to this idea of your own autonomy and being able to choose the character or the person that you want to be, and not exactly who you think you should be or who society or whatever has dictated you to be.
Or who others cause you to think you are. And because, there's a lot of pressure out there that will drive people into silence, into the shadows of life. And boy, and the citizen service is the kind of thing that pulls people from the shadows, pulls people out of silence. So they power up, they get empowered. I want to say that the complexities of today's society can be paralyzing. I mean, it is there's so many things going on, so much change, so much strain and drama, really, and you could feel very helpless.
Mm,
And it's very, very clear with the rise of mental health challenges, a lot of people are feeling hopeless as well as helpless. Well, I think the citizen service is here to fix that. And powering up is really giving you a sense of purpose, giving you a sense of agency. As I said, that first word, agency, is really, really critical and can make you take a step forward.
yeah, no, it's
Right?
awesome. And speaking of the idea of purpose, you're a graduate of Morehouse College,
Mhm.
HBCU, you know, I can't say much because I know there's rivalry in that space, but
Yeah.
it is a very dear, and favorite to a lot of people.
Mhm.
And, being a graduate of a HBCU, being a leader amongst HBCUs, not just within the system itself, but within the White House. Can you share your history of what it was like, choosing to go to HBCU, what it means to live a life of service that you've lived so far, and what
Mhm.
it means to give back to these communities?
Wow. So I I got to HBCUs logically because both my parents, many people in my family were HBCU graduates.
Amen.
Yeah, and so, but I had a power up upbringing. Okay, so they said, we want you to do well in school. Basically they said you can come home with any kind of grade you want, but if it's not an A, there's going to be a problem. we're, we're going to have a conversation. So let's just say that all four of us, and this is in first Philadelphia and then suburban Philadelphia, we were high performers in school.
Mm,
We and it really wasn't just we were scolded into it or made to do it. Our parents, had us loving to learn. And I have that classic bio. Mom was a teacher
mm,
and dad a preacher, and it's not just my dad; it's my dad, my grandfather, and my great grandfather, all preachers, Baptist preachers at that. And so basically, service was kind of in our bloodstream,
yeah.
in the DNA service. We were not sheltered when we moved to the suburbs, a predominantly white suburb,
Mm,
and there was considerable racism and stress. And our parents said, "Yeah, I know it's hard, but you're still going to pay attention and come home with A's." and,
mm.
if you're feeling they're not liking you or they're not feeling you in some way, um, the best thing you can do is to perform academically and show them
Mhm.
who's got it together. And boy, I mean, we were motivated to counter the negative elements of the racial climate
Mhm.
with high performance.
Mhm.
And that neutralized some of it. Of course, it provoked some jealousy too, but it did neutralize some of it. But we were motivated to perform well, and as I said, even though my parents went to HBCUs, they did not say you have to.
Mm,
They because and as you might expect, we were equipped to get in a lot of places,
yeah.
but you know, by the time I tell the story, my dad was a preacher, but my parents got divorced, and we started going to another church, and the pastor of this church was a Morehouse man. And basically, as this is true, and this is where I put it. He probably talked about Morehouse in the pulpit more than he talked about Jesus, and so we thought Jesus was a Morehouse man. So a lot of young men in the church like me, we went to Morehouse College. Really a disproportionate number of us went to Morehouse College because we figured the pastor, he was kind of a heroic guy. Martin Luther King
Mhm.
and Jesus all went to Morehouse, so we should go to Morehouse. Where else we going to
A
go?
different kind of Trinity, yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And so, and basically, that HBCU thing, that's where a lot of the inspiration to have an impact on the world. That's where a lot of it, it's so complemented my family upbringing.
Yeah.
And so then, Sam, I went from Morehouse to Harvard
Yeah.
for graduate school. And that became another marker of my experience because our parents, and my grandmother especially, she said, if you want to live a consequential life, a meaningful life,
Mm.
then you have to be into gap closure.
Mm.
There are gaps between the way people live. And Sam, when I saw the gap between Morehouse and Harvard, um, there wasn't a character gap. As a matter of fact, Morehouse was, in my view, then and now superior from a character standpoint.
Hmm.
But from a capital standpoint, I mean,
Night and day,
the
I'm
con-
sure.
oh my God, the
Yeah.
condition of the campus, the size of the endowment, the pay scale of the faculty, the
Mm.
workload of the faculty. I mean, by so many measures. So I went on this pathway in my life because that gap told me that Morehouse had exactly what Harvard needed,
Mm.
and Harvard had exactly what Morehouse needed.
Yeah.
And what the way I put it is, Morehouse had character preeminence. Um, they really knew how to educate young men and to position them for a life of consequence and service. Um, Harvard had capital preeminence. And so my dream was, why not have on the same campus at the same time high levels, optimized character and capital?
Hmm.
Well, Sam, that has never happened. In higher education history, you've never seen a premium emphasis on capital and character
Hmm.
on the same campus at the same time. So that's the mission I've been on, and it has service at its heart. So that's how I got on this
Yeah.
path. I know that's a long answer, but
No, no, it's
that's
a
the case.
beautiful answer. I think
Yeah.
we have an episode, it's called See on Both Sides, and it's
Mm-hmm.
primarily was supposed to be about community colleges, but a lot of times with these conversations, we just start flowing and we end up somewhere that we didn't really anticipate. And we
Mm-hmm.
spoke about this idea of the middle ground. And I know for a lot of people, especially young people, and or even in our current social political climate, there's like this need to be on like the black and white, the outer fringes of things, and like it's really
Mm-hmm.
hard to find a middle ground. And
Mm-hmm.
I think what you're tackling at this idea of, an institution of learning that cannot just, you know, get that capital, get that monies, but also
Mm-hmm.
be able to build, fully developed, young adults that are not
Mm-hmm.
just smart intellectually, but smart emotionally and can
Yeah. Yeah.
connect with one another. That's that middle ground that we're all looking for. I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we think of the middle ground as neutrality, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that's the case at all. I think
Right.
the middle ground is trying to find where we can all optimize ourselves to the fullest potential, or I guess power up to the fullest potential, and be
Yeah.
able to understand that we all come from such different walks of life that we have
Mm-hmm.
to bring in everybody's personal experience and narrative to find
Mm-hmm.
an optimized middle. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, that struggle has been going on, I'm sure, longer than written record. But
Yeah.
I have no
Yeah.
doubt
Yeah.
that if you're on this team, we're gonna be able to see it very soon.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Well said. Well said, Simon. Well said.
Thank you.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I want to talk a bit more about citizen service. I know we've mentioned it a few times, and
Mhm.
for our audience, this might be a new concept for some people that aren't subscribed to our newsletter. So subscribe to our newsletter. But the citizen service is a national campaign for a citizen-driven, solution-focused democracy that relies on mutual respect and pragmatism. And we
Mhm.
have a few episodes on mutual respect. Pragmatism is all about, identifying the problem, and instead of, attaching ourselves to that problem, we
Yeah.
attach ourselves to a solution and something that is, I don't want to say easily achieved, but is
Mhm.
realistic and idealistic at the same time.
Right.
And so I
Right.
wanted to ask you, even though you touched on it a little bit more, I just want to pull it out of you. Why
Hmm.
did you choose to volunteer and take on the presidency of citizen service?
Wow. I guess the first thing to say about that is two words: Harry Palzicki. I'm telling you, he is. Ever since I met him, he has this energy, he has this integrity, he has this character and power that he just exudes, and he's hard to say no to. And
I mean,
so
he could sell water to a fish,
yeah,
He has that charisma in him.
yeah, yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. It is true, and he's such a genuine person, and
Mhm.
so I came aboard as a board member
Yeah.
of the Citizen Service, and I was glad to be so. And as you might imagine, this kind of effort really is consistent with what my life has been about, with
Yeah.
what my family values have always been, and so it was a no brainer. No matter how busy I was, it was a no brainer to say yes to coming on the board. And and I was happy as a board member and an active board member too. But what happened next was kind of was unfortunate, and I think things are better now. But we had a very capable president,
Hmm.
Felicia Ganther, and Felicia Ganther was aboard. She's an HBCU grad and a very powerful president, and she had some health challenges and
Hmm.
had to take a break, had to step back. So at that point, Sam, there was a gap. We were trying to get a trajectory, trying to get off the ground, and there was a need there. And Harry and I talked, and yet again, I've never been able to say no to Harry. And I saw, I care enough about the citizen service to want to help in a more substantial way. So that's why I came aboard, and I'm happy I did. Uh, the team is great. The team is great, and that includes you, Sam. I've seen your work, and so it's a first rate team. And I believe that this assignment that we have,
Hmm.
this mission that we're on,
Hmm.
to really change America,
Yeah.
to empower people, to give them a sense that yes, they can have something to do with the quality of life in this country and in this world. And here are some tools. Here's a skill set that you can lean on here, and that's what this initiative is all about.
Yeah. I want to go off script a little bit, so don't be too mad.
Yep.
But
Hey.
one of the descriptors that we have for citizen service is citizen driven. And
Yes.
I think that's something that, you hear that and you're like, isn't all democracy citizen driven? I don't understand what you mean by that. And so could you elaborate for our audience a bit more what we mean by citizen driven and how that can bolster or help preserve our democracy?
Yeah, I'll actually go beyond that. I want to talk about citizen driven. All
Yes, sir.
right. I want to talk about solution focused,
Yes, sir.
and I want to talk about no blame. All right. So those three. So citizen driven. You know, we all get something of what it means. We get the language. We get the vocabulary of being an American citizen. We do the Pledge of Allegiance, in grade school. We just, but I'm sorry, what we learn is not as practical
Hmm.
as it now needs to be.
Yeah.
So people don't know how to be good citizens.
Yeah.
Now, I want to pause and say we're seeing some of it now because we're seeing a lot of activism, spontaneous, just people coming out, marches all over the country. And this is such a beautiful thing because it is people getting up off of their couches, out of their living room, whatever their comfort space, and they're going out and they are asserting, they are powering up to say what kind of America we want.
Yeah.
Now, this is powerful, but a lot of it is, as you know, Sam, you can watch the news.
Yeah.
A lot of it is episodic. It comes
Yes.
quickly. It happens on weekends. It
Mhm.
is it's not that textured
Mhm.
or informed. And I believe there are things that it's kind of performative. So
Yeah.
but there are things that we can do that kind of get at the nuts and bolts of citizenship. So do you know do you know who your representatives are?
Mhm.
Do you know where things are happening in your town or in your city where decisions are being made that are
Mhm.
going to have an influence about the quality of your life, whether it's a new company coming into town that may be toxic or zoning rules and regs and all kinds of things that are going on that will have an impact. People don't know the nuts and bolts of how to be citizens to
Yeah.
that degree. Enter the citizen service. So after you get into the protests are good, right? The protests are good. But you really have to concretize that. You really
Mhm.
have to give that some texture. You have to give it more meaning and
Yes.
enter the citizen service. Being citizen driven is really being we're going to see change that is driven by people who really know how to be citizens, not just in protest and demonstration, but really at the operational level
Yeah.
where real decisions are being made about the quality of our lives. So that's and that flows right into being solution focused
Mhm.
because people can say what they're for and what they're against. They can go out and get a bullhorn and shout it out, right?
Yeah.
But how do we get from whatever you describe to the reality of
Mhm.
change in our society? What solutions are you going to help drive? And so that's where citizen service comes in again because it's solution focused. It'll give you some ideas about where to go to figure out where change is happening. I just know, for example, that there are people who are wondering if you just take, and this is just an observation, I'm not expressing an opinion here, but an observation. There are people who may or may not have had a Tesla dealership coming into town, who may now know whether it's Tesla or anybody else who's coming into town, who's coming into our vicinity, and I want to know about that because I want to know if what they represent is consistent with our values,
Mhm.
and if it's not, I want to be able to express my opinion. I want to be able to tell others and empower others that we can have something to do with the quality of our lives, our local lives. And so it really is being solution focused empowers people. It really empowers them and inspires them with new ideas and informs them with new ideas and inspires them to act. And then there is and then there's no blame. And I have to say, Sam, when I first came on, I was like, okay, if anything, in the last I'd say decade,
Yeah.
but especially recently,
Mm-hmm.
um, the culprits are pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're at a point in this country where a lot of people think that the best thing we can do to make progress is to go back,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
To an earlier time. And I don't know when that was, but um, they're talking, I believe, when pressed to figure out when that was, it said the 1890s. Well, Sam, you and I know that the conditions of life for people of color, especially African Americans,
Mm-hmm.
for um, for religious minorities, especially Jews, um, Jewish Americans, and for women, for God's sake, um, were horrendous the farther back you go.
Yeah.
So I'm I'm of the view, and I believe most of the protests we see are of the view um, that progress, our best progress,
Mm-hmm.
is ahead of us.
Yes.
You know, there's a quote that I use from James Baldwin, "The Fire Next Time." James Baldwin said in "The Fire Next Time" that we have to achieve our country.
Mm-hmm.
We have to achieve our country. And once we do that, we will change the history of the world. That to me is beautiful. We have not yet achieved our country.
Mm-hmm.
America, we have not yet made it come true
Mm-hmm.
for enough people. That's where citizen service comes in because if enough people engage in this, and this is why we're trying to get a lot of college campuses aboard, if enough people engage with the citizen service, get certified, figure out the techniques, then we are going to achieve our country. We're going to realize America. And that condition is ahead of us. It's not behind us.
Mm-hmm. I love that idea. I think oftentimes I've you know, have been in service for a few years now. And, it's something that I've been interested in since I was a little girl. And I think that's just like the condition of being a woman of color, of, coming from a family of immigrants. Like you mentioned it, it's in your bloodstream, like you just have to do it. And like, I don't know what else
Mm-hmm.
to say. But I often get
Mm-hmm.
asked, like, Sam, like, why are you fighting so hard for it? You know what I mean? Like, why don't you just like
Mm-hmm.
get up and leave? Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're a first generation American, like what's the point? And I think that's the nail on the head, as Baldwin always does. It's this idea that America is not just a place, but an idea and a
Mm-hmm.
philosophy. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason why it took like a bunch of like more or less geniuses to come up with this idea of a country that, was kind of, radical at the time that it was, proposed, that it's not something that, just springs out of the ground and you're like, okay, I'll eat
Mm-hmm.
off this fruit. Like you have to,
Yeah.
cultivate it. You have to make deliberate strides towards achieving America. And
Yeah.
that's something that
Yeah.
we see in the history of this nation. We're going on, I think, 250 years, and we
Mm-hmm.
still have not achieved everything that the idea of America tells us it can be, and
Mm-hmm.
that can only be achieved, as you mentioned, through a citizen-driven effort and through an effort
Yeah.
for solutions. I've been watching recently. I don't want to like give free promotion, but I've been
Yeah.
watching a
Yeah.
documentary recently about the Vietnam War, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting to see how, at that time you have a bunch of young people that are, very anti-war, that are talking about, the disparities in this country, that are talking about, kind of feeling forced to do something that they wouldn't normally do and feel compelled to take to the streets. And I often hear like my mom will mention it. She'll be like, "Oh, like, people these days, they're out on these streets like I've never seen this before." I'm like, "Mom, that is the tradition of America." Like America is only ever achieved and is only ever, amazing when the people rise up and, bring solutions to the table. And that doesn't mean that's easy. I don't want to come across as though, you're going to bring a solution to, your city council, your mayor, your representative, and they'll be like, "Yeah, love that. That's awesome." one can hope, and sometimes it is that easy, but most times you really have to fight for it and you have to stick to your guns. And it's only ever easier if you do it with like-minded people. And
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think it necessarily means that everyone is the same. You have to find a monolith of people that believe
Mhm.
and do and, create and look exactly like you.
Mhm.
I think that's very dangerous for one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but what it does mean is that you find people that share common values with you and
Yeah.
believe
Yeah.
in things such as democracy and believe in things such as egalitarianism and believe in things like equity. And
Yeah.
maybe we have different ideas of how to achieve that. And we might have different strategies on
Mhm.
the best course of action. But
Yeah.
I think once we're able to realize that, you might have grown up with like a little more money, a little less money, you might be a little darker than I am or a little lighter than I am. You might have a completely different religion than I do. But
Mhm.
when you get down to the core of it, we care about our communities and we care
Yeah.
about living a life that's fully fulfilled and feels free as it can be, and feels, joyful. And I
Mhm.
think that's what citizen service tries to bring to the table, that, this utopia of America that, we often speak about and that we feel really close to. I love America. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
as I do love it, and I love the idea of it, and I want it to be a thing. And I think
Mhm.
anyone that's grown up in this country, whether you came as an immigrant or whether you were born here, whether you have generations here, you love
Mhm.
the idea. And I think
Mhm.
it wouldn't be a great idea if we didn't all love it. And
Yeah.
I think it says a lot to what our community can be and what our country can be.
Mhm.
And so I think one of the ways to get there can be the citizen service. So I wanted
Mhm.
to ask you, a lot of what we're talking about, a lot of what I'm talking about is the
Mhm.
hope for America.
Mhm.
So where do you see this hope to preserve our democracy, to achieve our country? And where do you see that path of hope leading?
Yeah. That's the you know Samantha, that's a great question. I have to say, I because this is a time when hope can be kind of hard to find.
Hmm.
There's so much conflict. There's so much stress. There's a lot of doubt. There's a lot of uncertainty. Um, and I do think it's becoming clear or clearer that a lot of people say they love America, but we don't all mean the same thing.
Mm.
And so I'm going to say a little bit more about what I love America. And I love the way you described it. Because you mentioned there's one word that I want to hang out on. And that is, you said egalitarian. Um, so that equality imperative,
Hmm.
that in my view is the North Star of the founding documents. Okay. The Declaration of Independence, all are created equal. And they said men at that point, but it's generally understood to be humanity. All
Yes.
right. No matter no matter where you're from. And that is sitting at the foundation of this country. That idea, and that hence the gift from France of that Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired or your poor. Come one, come all. We are the place. We're we are not designed to be as tribal as other places in the world. We take people from that's what's embedded in the founding documents.
Hmm.
But we have some of our leaders who are the way they conduct themselves, the way they speak, the values they exude are not that.
Hmm.
And in my view, they are un-American. All right. But it's worse than that. And this is one of the reasons why I mentioned my biography, Sam. So I'm, you know, being the son and grandson and great grandson of preachers, you have a lot of questions.
Hmm.
So growing up, you have a lot of theological questions.
Yeah.
And so as a result, my brother and I, both of us went to Morehouse, and both of us, after Morehouse, went to a divinity school. I went to Harvard Divinity School,
Yeah.
and I went there with one question in mind. I wanted to know what all religions have in common.
Hmm.
What do all religions have in common? Now, Sam, there are 8 billion people on the planet,
Yeah.
right? 8 billion. And 80% of the 8 billion are organized into four religions. 80% of all humanity. Christianity is the
Yeah.
biggest group. That's about 31%. Islam, that's 25%. Then you have Hinduism, which is about 16, 17%, and Buddhism, which is about 8 or 9%. So you got 80% of humanity in those four religions, and then there are many other religions.
Yeah.
But what we know about those four, or what I discovered at Harvard Divinity School about those four and a lot of others, is what they all have in common is exactly what's at the foundation of our founding documents, that ethic that all are created equal,
Yeah.
that all humanity is one. So here you have the country's founding documents and all religions agreeing. So that to me is an imperative about how we ought to conduct ourselves. We ought to conduct ourselves as if that's true. And I believe the values associated with that truth are also at the foundation, not just at the foundation of every religion,
Hmm.
at the foundation of the country, but at the foundation of the citizen service.
Hmm.
Because that's one of the reasons why Harry Pazicki was so magnetic to me. He exuded that ethic. All are created equal. It's obvious that we're not conducting ourselves that way. Here's a method where we can do that. I have hope for this country, to get to your question.
Hmm.
Hope for this country and for this world, because I believe that enough people in the world have that idea,
Hmm.
all are created equal, somewhere in their consciousness. And I believe the dynamics of conflict right now um, are going to eventually drive more and more people to a place where they say, you know what? A lot of the conflicts going on now are because we have become uprooted from that foundational point, that foundational ethic. If we start there, if we realign ourselves to that truth, whether you do it as a patriot because you're American,
Yeah.
and that should be inarguable. I don't care what kind of America you want. There should be no debate that this country should treat as humane and just as anybody else all the people in this country, whether they are citizens or just visiting. If they're just visiting, they're here illegally, they get due process.
Amen. Hmm.
That's because human beings deserve a right to be listened to. What's your story? Okay, well, according to our evidence, you're here illegally. There's a legal way to do it.
Hmm.
And when you go through that, we'll welcome you. Oh, we almost sent you away and you're a citizen. We're sorry. And if we send you away and find out later you're a citizen, we're going to bring you back because that's an imperative.
Hmm.
Because all are created equal, and we have a constitution that says a whole lot more about how everyone ought to be treated. My hope is grounded in, I should say, my religious belief first, my theological outlook, And my hope is grounded in um, the kind of way you express yourself as an American. I believe it because I believe with most people when they say I love America, I love the idea of America,
Hmm.
they love the idea of a place on the planet Earth where everyone is treated fairly and justly, and and we have an egalitarian society. We are not there yet. I believe the citizen service is one of the tools that can help to get us there.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said. Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah,
think I think sometimes these words can go over our head, and it's really
yeah,
easy to kind of get caught up in the terminology of things. But when you break it
yeah,
down, simple as that,
yeah.
it's really that we want to live somewhere where people are not just equal in theory, but in practice.
Mhm.
And
Right.
that's like you mentioned, that's one of the foundation principles of citizen service. It's mutual respect. And
Mhm.
I think I'm gonna steal that now because a lot of times people
Yeah.
are like, oh, like no blame, like you mean like don't hold people accountable, and I'm like, I never said that.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
that's where no blame comes from. This idea of
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna hear you out. I'm gonna listen to what you have to say, and it is a bit of threading that needle because some people, some leaders, they feel a tendency to uphold values and uphold actions that hurt other people, plain and simple, that
Hmm.
put
Hmm.
people at risk, that put whole demographics of people in harm's way.
Hmm.
And, I like to tell people that doesn't mean that like you can't say that's wrong, that you can't call
Hmm.
somebody out on doing something that's
Yeah.
harmful. Because, once you stop calling people out, you're on the sideline. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
You're co-signing injustice, and like that's not what the citizen service is about. But what it is
Hmm.
about is understanding that, that blame that you're placing, it's not just the person. You know what I mean? The
Hmm.
person is a symptom of the problem. And
Hmm.
going to the person and being like, you're the reason why all this is happening, unfortunately, someone else would take that place if we don't
Hmm.
actually look at the issue at hand.
Hmm.
It isn't
Hmm.
just like, let's say, a racist person. It's racism.
Hmm.
Without
Right.
the
Right.
actual ism, there is no
Hmm.
ist, you know?
Yeah.
So
Right.
we have to understand that the blame isn't just an individual, isn't just a symptom, isn't just,
Hmm.
that one instance that happened. It's a system of oppression.
Yeah.
It's an idea. It's multiple actions that have snowballed into
Hmm.
something else. And like you mentioned, for the last you mentioned 10 years. I think maybe a little bit longer than that.
Yeah.
For the last 10-ish years,
Yeah. Yeah.
we put egalitarianism.
Especially
Yes,
in the last 10. Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
put egalitarianism on the back end. We've put it on the
Yeah.
back burner, and we've
Yeah.
forgotten that, it's not just about holding these values and being like, yeah, I think that's important. It's about putting action into it, putting conviction. As
Hmm.
you mentioned right from the beginning, it's about removing yourself from anonymity, removing yourself from just like someone that believes these things and turning
Yeah.
into someone, transforming into someone that upholds these standards through the way they live their life and through the
Yeah.
actions that they take.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's awesome. I think that's a great way to go back to what we mentioned in the beginning, that it isn't just about becoming a face in the crowd and claiming you
Hmm.
like something or
Hmm.
don't like something, or
Hmm.
having those episodic moments of protest or marches,
Hmm.
etc. And then
Hmm.
you go back home and then you turn on the TV,
Hmm.
go on TikTok, and like
Hmm.
you wait for
Hmm.
your next moment to perform democracy. It's about,
Hmm.
living it every day. I
Hmm.
That's a perfect way to say it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we're wrapping up, but I do have
Hmm.
a couple more questions. How
Hmm.
does being of service benefit the individual? Because I get burnt out constantly. I know a lot of people that live a life of service are constantly exhausted. My mom yelled at me like last week and she was like, Samantha, you have to find a moment to relax. And I was like, Mom, that's such an innovative idea. I never thought about that.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
despite how difficult it can be and how draining it can be, what are the benefits to the individual? And what are the benefits of joining the citizen service?
Yeah. So you mentioned one of them.
Mhm.
There is a need that we have in this country, in this world, really, People don't know what it means to be in a world where there's mutual respect.
Hmm.
Um, and and we won't be able to elevate that until we have more people who understand what self-respect is.
Mm.
All right, because this mutual respect is pretty much impossible unless it's grounded in and among people who have sufficient self-respect.
Hmm.
I believe the citizen service, because it's so empowering, um, it can enhance people's self-respect.
Yeah.
Um, First, by giving them ideas for stepping out, whether it's out of the anonymity, whether it's out of the shadows, whether it's out of the background and into the foreground. We're talking about servant leadership. And a lot of people are are really empowered to exert that, but they just don't know it. So
Hmm.
they need and once you get an idea of the kind of impact you can have, your self-respect grows. And once your self-respect grows, you can you can engage in more mutual respect. You're a better speaker, you're a better listener,
Hmm.
and you're a better beyond listener, a better hearer,
Yeah.
because everyone who listens doesn't hear. And I want to say that, again, benefits, personal benefits, self-respect, mutual respect, that therefore leads to better camaraderie. I
Hmm.
believe that the conflicts we have, whether it's blue state, red mentality, blue mentality, all that kind of stuff, whatever it is, there are many nodes of conflict. So whatever it is, we are more inclined to have mutual respect and engage in camaraderie. To We may have a disagreement about something, and we may begin to hear each other, and we may not fully agree, but we will move toward each other. And all of a sudden, I will not see the other as much as an enemy, as far apart as I used to see them. And that's a beautiful thing. We've become very tribal in this country,
Yeah.
very tribal. Always been. This is not, but it's more intense now.
Hmm.
It's far more intense now. It was very, very intense. And I want to say it from a racial standpoint. Obviously, this country has been much worse.
Hmm.
Um, Native Americans will have a viewpoint about this country that we need to hear and never forget, and continue to repair at every chance. Um, but we don't, and we don't do it enough, and we are not as sensitive, and therefore we're not as sensible
Hmm.
about the harm that we've done. There are very large numbers of people, Sam, you know this, who would rather ignore it,
Yeah.
who would rather move it off the table, take it out of the library, right?
Hmm.
Ban it, ban whatever consciousness opportunities we have to be more aware of the harm we've done and how to repair it. Um, And all of that is empowering, Sam. It really is. It really is. Once you have self respect, mutual respect, camaraderie, then you have the power. You understand that you are empowered to make real change. And then you may still go out on Fridays and Saturdays and take part in protests,
Yeah.
but you'll have something to do in between. And
Hmm.
while you're out there, you can tell others. You can invite other people to the next meeting, the meeting on Tuesday afternoon at 4 o'clock at City Hall. You need to be there because, and say the reasons why. That's the empowerment part of this. And I believe it can work magically. That's why this is a brilliant strategy we have to get into the schools, get into higher education, get into the churches, get into the corporate community, get into the social agencies. We have all of these nodes, all of these areas where we want to engage partners in this work. That's the campaign that we're engaged in. I'm really focused on higher education because that's I've been in higher ed my whole career, and that's what I know best. But it's not just higher education; it is other walks of life, other areas, and we are going to make progress with this campaign.
Yeah.
And with partners like you, Sam, with team, with a lot of great people here, I think we're going to be just fine.
Yeah. Hoping for maybe even good,
Yeah,
maybe better than fine.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's awesome. I think the benefits speak for themselves, and I think once you decide to live a life of service to others, you realize you're serving yourself. You know,
Yeah,
I we have to understand that also, I don't have a martyr complex. I know a lot of
mm,
people do,
yeah, yeah.
but I don't only heal my community for others, I heal my community for myself.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
also want to live somewhere that's, egalitarian and kind and just. And, I want to be part of a community that reflects my values. And
Hmm.
I think once people realize that, it might be a little uncomfortable at first, you're doing it for yourself along with everyone else, you're more
Hmm.
willing.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
I saw something recently that said discipline is the highest form of self-respect. And I
Hmm.
think that's something that really resonates, not just, I was looking at it, it was like something to do with working out. And I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. But
Hmm.
I think it also has to do with serving your community and being
Hmm.
someone that is driven when it comes to your country and your community and your democracy. It's understanding that this is something that you're gonna have to take on, and it's gonna take time, and your motivation will waver. Motivation is something that you should
Hmm.
never ever rely on because it comes and goes, but you can
Yeah,
always rely on your discipline. And
yeah, yeah.
if you, like you mentioned, if you build that self-respect and you
Hmm.
decide to do this, you can always count on your discipline to keep you going, to keep you driven,
Yeah.
and to keep
Hmm.
your head on that needle the entire.
Hmm.
And it only gets
Hmm.
easier and more enjoyable when you get to do
Hmm.
it with other people, when you have your comrades, when you have your homies that are doing it with you. And
Hmm.
at first, with my friends, I tell them all the time, like, we gotta go do this. And they're like, Sam. And now they're like, did you go to the city hall meeting? Because blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's something that you want to participate in once you understand it. And,
Hmm.
luckily for me and for all of us, we have something like citizen service that will give you these tools and resources that are easily digestible. And if they
Hmm.
aren't easily
Hmm.
digestible, we're easily accessible. So if you have any
Hmm.
questions, you can ask us because
Hmm.
we're really everyday people.
Hmm.
Dr. Wilson,
Hmm.
you're so impressive, and you
Yeah,
are such an inspiration. And I
yeah.
do want the people to know that you are, at the end of the day, you're a human being, and you're someone that, I connect with very easily, and I'm sure a lot of people connect with very easily. And so
Hmm.
it's amazing to understand that, someone that is a Morehouse man, someone that is
Hmm.
a Harvard grad, someone that,
Hmm.
asks these grand questions when it comes to theology is also, my neighbor, and someone that wants to fight and
Yeah,
grit their teeth alongside with me. So I'm
yeah,
really grateful, and I'm really excited to take on this journey with you, alongside you.
yeah. Well, I'm impressed by you too. So I love your work. I do. I've seen it. I love your work. But Sam, I'd be remiss if I didn't end with this because um, all are created equal
Hmm.
is not the only thing that all religions have in common. So let me close with this because the truth is, and I believe this, and you again with brilliance, you talked about motivation. We can lose our motivation, but if we stay disciplined,
Hmm.
we can rely on that. Here's something that has kept me motivated and disciplined and driven, all right, and hopeful. Um, all religions agree, not just that all are created equal. All religions agree, Sam, that everything's going to be all right. All right. That when the smoke clears, when the war is over, when this conflict settles, everything's going to be all right. But that should not be left to chance, and that should not be left to others. That's why we need more people in the citizen service, so they can understand how they personally can be a part of the reason why everything's going to be all right.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's awesome. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you.
So much, Dr. Wilson. Appreciate it
All
so
right.
much. Have a great evening. Thank you so much for coming on to Power Up Podcast. Sorry to all my other interviewees, but this has definitely been my favorite one. So thank you so much.
I do.
Have a good one.
Okay. You take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. It's me again. So we just wrapped up with Dr. Wilson, and I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. We finished talking about the citizen service, but it is not the last time you will ever hear about it. If you're interested in learning more or even signing up for the service, please check us out at www.thecitizenscampaign.org. And right underneath the action tab, you will find Join the Service. So until next time, this is Sam, signing out. Power Up Podcast is brought to you by the Citizens Campaign. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at the Citizens Campaign or our website, citizenscampaign.org. Power Up Podcast is written, recorded, and edited by Samantha Castro and Cesar Romero. The official music for Power Up Podcast is brought to you by Banks and Nova Future. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week. Stay strong and power up.